This week's edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight is brought to you by Leff Atlanta Media, Atlanta's best journalist database. Subscribe at leffsatlantamedia.com. Welcome to the next edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight. We are talking today with Sammie Purcell, who's with Rough Draft. Good afternoon, Sammie.
Hi, how are you doing?
I am good. I'm good. Thanks for taking some time. So the entertainment in this town has become a quite a thing, and I know that
hmm
that's your focus to some extent. But I want to let's start with tell us a little bit about Rough Draft and what Rough Draft is and where people can find it, and then we'll talk about kind of what your specific role is, because I want to make sure people know where to find your work.
Sure. So, Rough Draft Atlanta, you can find us at roughdraftatlanta.com. But it's a little bit of an umbrella. So, we've got a bunch of verticals that you can check out on the site and in print. We have monthly editions. So, we've got our reporters, which cover Brookhaven, Buckhead, Dunwoody, and Sandy Springs. And then we've also got Atlanta in Town, which is actually celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. So, that's really exciting. And then we've got our Rough Draft newsletters. So, the regular Rough Draft newsletter goes out daily, and you can go to the website and you should get a pop-up option to go ahead and put your email in and subscribe to those if you like. And then we've also got a few nicher newsletters. So we've got Side Dish, which covers food. We've got Stacks, which is books. We've got Yalla, which kind of covers the Jewish community here in Atlanta. And then we've also got Scene, which is where I come in.
Very good segue. Uh,
Yeah.
so, so, so tell us about, so your role is kind of covering, among other things, I'm sure, covering kind of the entertainment scene here in Atlanta. So how do you define your beat and your job?
Yeah, so I think what I'm really interested in is covering kind of more of the indie scene in Atlanta. So while I've had Scene, which is the entertainment newsletter that we do, it comes out weekly on Fridays. Um, I have tried to kind of put an emphasis on the indie scene here, and I want to continue to do that a little more. Around this time of year, award season is really ramping up, so it'll tend to be a few more interviews with maybe kind of bigger names, which is really exciting for me. I love getting those interviews. But I do want to make sure and, try to keep the newsletter also as local as possible. And I think, Georgia's entertainment industry is all about Marvel and all about those big projects coming in. But I think it's important that we don't forget about the people who are working here locally and living here and making a home here while they also work in the industry. So I try to pay as much attention to those guys as possible.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta's got such a vibrant community of independent film
hmm
producers and smaller productions and, studio. I mean, there's the big giant
Yeah.
studios but there's for every one or two of the studios that have 20 sound stages, there's a half dozen that have one or two or three stages that are doing different
hmm
kinds of productions or different sizes of productions. They're not everybody can be the Endgame Marvel Avengers Endgame
Yeah.
size
It's
size
really
production,
difficult
right?
to get to that size. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's great seeing all the different people in the ecosystem that help that make it all work. People who do the equipment rental, like PC&E,
hmm
and people who do craft services and transportation, and there's companies that rent animals for productions.
Yeah.
If you need a dog or a donkey or a python, right? There's people in Georgia who will get that for you, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a thriving, very huge, comprehensive ecosystem that goes all the way from the top to the bottom. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like with the strikes passed, everyone seems optimistic that the things are going to start picking up in the first quarter next year. Is that what you're hearing too?
I think people are optimistic. I feel like people kind of been optimistic for the entire year as we kind of came off the
Right.
strikes last year. Like the goalpost keeps kind of get pushed back. Like, oh, it'll happen this fall, like, or it was the summer before that, and now it's the fall, and now it's early next year. I have my fingers crossed. I hope that production starts picking up. I know it seems really dire for a lot of people who are working out there right now. But I know for a lot of folks it seems really dire right now. But the film industry finds a way to keep going. So, hopefully things do pick up next year, at the beginning of next year. But we'll see. The strikes definitely had a really big effect on production. And, coming out of COVID or quote unquote out of COVID, when production first started, there was kind of this huge boom, and now that's really kind of fallen away. But fingers crossed, next year brings good things.
And the kind of the content structure is changing, I think, too, right? In terms of
Mhm.
how much Netflix and YouTube Red and some of those streaming channels are wanting. I mean, it seemed like for a while that was really there was a ton of that online content being produced, and seems like maybe there's a reconsideration of how much money some of those networks are putting in.
Yeah, maybe. I still think streaming is kind of I mean, it's gonna be king, I think, for a while. I'm a big proponent of the theatrical experience. So if you're listening to this, I would implore you to go support one of the local independent theaters here, the Plaza, the Terra. They're all really awesome. But I think we are going to continue to see kind of more of those, movies made for streaming, shows made for streaming, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So you mentioned kind of focusing on kind of the indie market. Is there a way that you kind of differentiate kind of how you want to do your coverage versus what the AJC or other media might say they want to do for coverage? I mean, everybody like Rough Draft has kind of obvious its geographic focus,
Mhm.
but how would you say here's how we're different in terms of how we cover entertainment?
Sure. So I the industry side and the business side is obviously really important, but I am more of, I think, an artistic person in general. So I do try to kind of focus on the creative aspect of it. So whether that's interviews with interesting people working in the entertainment industry at large or here. But as far as the indie scene goes, I do think, and there's a lot of entertainment stuff going on in Georgia. So it makes sense that there would be kind of a focus on all the marvel of it all, or, and we have this in scene. Like we'll talk about, what big productions are filming here if there are any. So there's definitely a focus there, but I do want to try to give, again, just like the smaller, more local independent creatives as much attention as I possibly can. Or even if it's, an interview with an interesting person. I just interviewed Marie Cisco, who is just got a job at a position with the Alliance, and she's a really cool, interesting producer working locally here, and she's worked on bigger projects and smaller projects, but it was great kind of talking to her about what the artistic community in Atlanta is looking for, and that sort of as, scene continues to grow and I continue to grow as a writer, I hope to sort of pull a little more focus too.
So covering kind of the music and art and kind of local theater scene, that kind of thing, in addition to the what you see in the movie theater kind of stuff, right?
Theater for sure. Music, I think, is kind of a whole nother animal. I try to cover stuff as much as I can. I am only one person. But music is just, there's so much music out there. So I try to get to it as much as I can, but I would love to see a cool local reporter break out and really, really dig into the music scene. That would be awesome.
Okay, so shout out to Keith. Sammy
Yeah.
needs some staff. Keith, maybe give
Just some
Sammy like
help. Or
two or three
any free,
people under
yeah,
her. Yeah, people.
any freelancers out there who want to cover music, please let me know. That would be
Okay,
great.
yeah. There's I know there's a few folks
Yeah.
I know who used to work for Creative Loafing who kind of cover kind of the music scenes. I'll
That would be
mention that
awesome.
to a couple of folks. Is
Mhm.
there are there kind of certain stories that you're looking at? Think, okay, here's what things you want to cover kind of in the next couple of months that are kind of on your radar.
Yeah, so I'm actually I've scheduled an interview, hoping that it all goes through. I don't want to say it will before it does, but with a female studio owner here in Georgia. So I'm really excited to talk to her. I've got a couple, as I said before, it's kind of award season, so I've got fingers crossed a couple of cool interviews coming up with some really interesting directors who are probably going to be in the awards conversation, which is really exciting. And then in January, I am getting to go to Sundance for the first time, which
Oh,
is
very good.
really exciting. Yeah, so Georgia will have a little bit of a footprint there. That'll be fun.
That's great. Yeah, I know there's usually some folks from like Georgia Entertainment
Yeah,
that go,
they'll
and
be there.
yeah, the Atlanta contingent. There's like kind of Lee Thomas and
Yeah.
Beth Talbert. Those kind of folks usually go to those kinds of things. I guess. Were you disappointed or not surprised that Sundance didn't choose Atlanta?
I got really optimistic there for a while, but they haven't announced yet as of the recording of this podcast. I kind of think they're probably going to stay in Park City. The more I think about it, I think I kind of let the light glaze over my eyes a little bit back in the beginning, especially when we kind of made it through the first round of cuts. But I think this might be a little bit of a negotiating tactic. I'm not sure, but that's kind of my 2 cents, my
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking. I mean, Atlanta would have been great in terms of having all the venues and facilities and
hmm
infrastructure, but I feel like they kind of like being in a smaller city.
Yeah, and it kind of shocked me that Savannah didn't get a little further, but that kind of also I think signals to me that maybe they're just playing nice with us a little bit. But I did talk to a lot of local filmmakers who were excited by the prospect, so that is kind of a bummer in that regard. But
Yeah. Well, and whenever you're considered for something like this, it kind of keeps you on the map, and
yeah,
it kind of
absolutely.
raises Atlanta's awareness and Georgia's
hmm
awareness as a film state, as an entertainment state. So that's not it's not bad. There are a lot of
No,
other cities that weren't in consideration, and they're
yeah,
you know
we made it pretty far, so that's good for
yes.
us.
So
But
we got to
yeah,
we got to talk about all the great things that are happening in Georgia on the
hmm
entertainment scene, and you know it's fine.
Can only be good.
Sundance. We got lots of other stuff. I mean, we got
Yeah.
lots of Atlanta. We got Atlanta Film Festival and the Jewish Film
hmm
Festival and the Rome
Out on
Film
film,
Festival
all that
out
stuff.
on
Yeah.
out on
hmm
film. Yeah, Jim Farmer's shout out to Jim Farmer out on film. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a ton of things that's it's hard to keep up with it all, right?
Yeah, there's so many great film festivals here. If you haven't been to any, definitely go check them out. They're fun.
Yeah. And where's a
hmm
good place to keep up with entertainment information? Do you have like I don't know, like a podcast or something?
Yeah. Yeah. So I subscribe to a lot of newsletters. I think my favorites probably are Puck. So that's Matthew Bellany's kind of overarching website, but he has a really great Hollywood newsletter that comes out. I can't remember if it's weekly or twice a week. Don't quote me on that. And then there's also a really great one called The Dailies that I just started subscribing to. That is just sort of a really kind of comprehensive rundown of like box office stuff, Hollywood news, new productions that are kind of in the works. So those are the two I think right now that I look at them every day. I get a lot of my news from there. Podcasts, I listen to The Big Picture, which is a Ringer podcast quite a bit. Matthew Bellany has a podcast called The Town that is a little more industry focused, but if you're interested in stuff like that, it's a really good kind of big picture look at what's going on. And then I also have a new podcast that I just started with Aaron Strand, the local filmmaker here. So that podcast is we'll look at kind of bigger picture industry things that are going on, news, stuff like that, and sort of talk about why it matters to indie filmmakers. So that's an awesome thing to look out too. It's called Crash Zoom.
Okay, Crash
Yeah.
Zoom.
hmm
Okay, and is that launched yet, or is it coming soon?
It just launched, so you can
Okay.
go on Spotify. I believe right now, let me make sure I get the name of this right. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I'll find it. Now, usually what I'll do is I'll put a little
I've got it.
graphic
I've
in.
got it.
Yeah, got it.
So right now it's coming out. So Aaron already had a podcast. So right now it's coming out under the Behind the Slate name, but it's called Crash Zoom. So that's sort of a separate venture. But anything else, if you want to kind of know about what's going on in Atlanta specifically, scene is more the speed.